Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show, Week 15 Utilization Report Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to get those minds and fantasy lineups right ahead of the playoffs. Maybe this is just irrelevant to you. Maybe you are so freaking good at life that you already earned a fantasy playoff round one bye. But for the rest of us losers, but still winners out there, we got some work to do. And we got the man to help us do just that, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland in the house. And Dwain, you're very optimistic, happy-go-lucky guy. I love that about you. However, you were saying pre-show, there was maybe a little bit of anger going on in the McFarland household last night, thanks to Mr. Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. I was in the final 5 of our 2 guillotine leagues that we had going here at Fantasy Life. And, I should have benched Jalen Hurts so that I just couldn't get negative points. I didn't think of that. And I got chopped. So, yeah, a little bit angry. But you know what? The Eagles lost. So everything is well. And I'm sorry, Eagles fans, but you guys know I'm a Cowboys fan, and you probably wouldn't want it any other way than for me to not like the Eagles. I did have A.J. Brown going in another league, Ian, so I was good with that.
Isn't it kind of sick, Dwayne, how when you eventually end up losing, hopefully win your championship every single league you're ever in, but when you do lose a playoff game from time to time, one of the first things I do is always just go to my bench and see if there was a realistic optimal lineup for me to play. And if the answer was no, I feel better. I feel better that just my team was that big of a loser. I can't point the finger purely at the man in the mirror, even though it still is my fault. This is the game we play.
Yeah, but the players have to play. That's what good coaches say, Ian. You can only do so much. The players still have to play. Now, if you pick the wrong players to begin with, you probably wouldn't be in the championship. So you had some good players. They just didn't do their job that week. That's the way I look at it.
Gotta love fantasy football. And gotta love the utilization report, guys. Again, check it out on fantasylife.com for free if you haven't already. We're getting to all that very shortly. First, though, it's time for our DraftKings opening lines. Wanted to quickly recap Monday Night Football. Chargers did beat the Eagles, as we said, 22-19 in a game that, yes, will probably mostly be remembered for Jalen Hurts somehow inexplicably committing 2 turnovers on the same play, -4 fantasy points. Gotta love that, unless you were starting Jalen Hurts like Dwayne. But Dwayne, let's face it, the real story here was this Chargers backfield. Marion Hampton returned from his long stint on the IR. Didn't exactly walk back into a featured role.
Yeah, we saw 69% of the snaps go to Kamani Vidal. It was closer in the rush department, though, 47% to Vidal, 43% to Hampton. It was clearly the passing down work going to Vidal, though, with 56% route participation versus only 20% for Hampton. So I would say this is going to tighten up, though, Ian. I would expect I don't know if it'll happen next week. In the rest of season projections, I projected Hampton as the lead back the rest of the way. So I think he'll eventually be the lead ball carrier. I think the big question, though, is does he really take over the passing down work? And I think Vidal's played well enough, and he showed those downfield chops as well. He's one of these few guys that can actually run these routes and, get loose on a bullet route, wheel route, those sort of things. And Justin Herbert seems to find him at times. Last night, obviously, he had the nice little check down pass that he took a long way after the catch based on the alignment that the Chargers had set up. And then the Eagles just turned him loose. So I think we'll probably see Hampton 55, 60% of the rushing attempts, and it's just, when does it happen? We've got really 3 games left to find out. But I do think that Vidal probably stays in this pass down role. I will rank Hampton ahead. I think you and Friedman, I checked, both had Hampton ranked ahead this week. But it's a matter of how close do you put them together? So where'd you end up with Vidal? I didn't look at that.
That's the thing. So before Monday Night Football, I had Hampton as my RB19, Vidal more so RB38, kind of bigger difference there. I'm going to have to squeeze that gap, Dwayne. I'm thinking that Hampton's going to be more so on that RB2 borderline with Jalen Warren, Travion Henderson, Rico Dowdle. I'm probably going to Kamani Vidal around that RB30 range with Kenneth Gainwell. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, for rest of season projections, Hampton came in as running back 21. Now that's me projecting that he does start to take over more of the rushing work. This week, though, I was just working on the weekly rankings and I had it closer, like what you just said. And Vidal, just for folks, if they're wondering, rest of season projections, he came in as a high-end running back 4, so borderline running back 3. But we obviously know that he has value if for some reason, Hampton, suffers a tweak and has to miss some time.
Unfortunately, that Chargers offensive line not exactly working at its best right now. How could they with all the injuries? But 7 sacks allowed to Justin Herbert there. And again, hard to be exactly too optimistic about the offensive line opening up some holes for either back here moving forward. Yep.
Real quick, just on the Chargers for folks, like, you guys are watching the game, so you're seeing it, but the numbers are bearing out as well. -9% drop back rate over expected over the last 2 games with Herbert dealing with the injury. And then even before that, if we went back over a 6-game sample, they were -2%, which isn't terrible, but this was one of the most pass-heavy teams in the NFL to start the year. So they have made an adjustment, and there is a ripple effect because they're rotating all these receivers. None of them are getting to 90% route participation rate. And the guy that it may be impacting the most is Rondé Gadsden, Ian, because we had the second game in a row where he didn't get to an 80% route participation. Not exactly a blocking tight end. So he's out there for the pass plays, but they're running the ball a lot more. And you have to think with Hampton back, they will lean into that even more with Herbert hurt.
Big 3 wide receivers and Rondé Gadsden combined for just 49 receiving yards and 0 trips to the end zone. Certainly going to be docked around the world in the ranks here ahead of week 15. Otherwise, for the Eagles, again, kind of already threw enough stones at Jalen Hurts, so we're done there. But Saquon Barkley, 122 yards and a long 52-yard house call. Dwayne, look, I know, you're a Cowboys fan. I'm a Cowboys fan. Okay. But putting that aside, Saquon Barkley house calls are so much freaking fun, man. Just the joy in that dude once he starts to get in the open field. He starts waving his arms around like a maniac in the end zone. It's just a fun experience. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say. And the Eagles still, like, if you look at their offensive line, like, they have the names. They just haven't been healthy. Like, if they can get their guys healthy, that's huge for Saquon. And Saquon's a guy we've talked about a lot on this show as being a guy that was due for positive regression. Came through last night, obviously, with those 18.2 fantasy points, including that long run.
Set up well in week 15 against the Raiders. Hopefully, again, I know it's tough for Saquon Barkley fantasy managers to make the playoffs given the season, but if he did squeak on through, hopefully bigger and better days to come. Similar sentiment for A.J. Brown, 100 yards. I know he did have only 1 official drop, but probably another 2 that certainly you would have liked to see him catch. Continuing to demand targets, though, and low-key not putting together a wide receiver 1 season despite a tumultuous start, to put it lightly. Also credit to Dallas Goedert for catching 8 of 10 targets for 78 scoreless yards in that one. So, it was a very Thursday night-ish, Monday night game, but, entertaining nevertheless. That said, though, Dwayne, the real big news over the last 24 hours, new Colts starting quarterback, Philip Rivers. What year is it? We do not know if he is going to be starting, but yes, the Colts have indeed signed 44-year-old Philip Rivers with Daniel Jones done for the season, with Riley Leonard dealing with a knee injury, leaving Brett Rypien potentially, again, battling Rivers for a starting job. So based on what we have heard, apparently the tryout went fine, and they're not too worried about Rivers' arm talent or arm strength at this point. They do want to see how he gets through Wednesday and Thursday practices. So I don't think you bring in Rivers, Dwayne, without the intent to start him at some point. I would think this is a pretty tough turnaround. By the way, they're going into Seattle this week, so it's not like you exactly have a matchup, to warm the guy up with. I would tend to think Rypien should still be the guy that we expect to start, but I don't know, man. I'm saying like 60-40 at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Rypien's the guy that I'm projecting this week. I was just working on the weekly stuff before we hopped on the show, and I've still got him in there, but we'll just kind of have to read the tea leaves on this one. I will say it's not ideal. Riley Leonard, I did his rest of season projections, and it came out to 160 passing yards per game, Ian, until we find out more. And if you look at Rypien, it was even worse. He came out at 145. So Philip Rivers, while I don't think that he's an amazing quarterback, I don't think the offense will do what it was doing under Daniel Jones. It at least gives us hope maybe in 2 weeks that it can be a functional offense. I'll say this, like, the scheme Shane Steichen runs really does cater to someone that wants to get the ball out quick and that can be an anticipation thrower. So that's probably fine for Tyler Warren's, probably okay for Michael Pittman. I don't think it's a very good thing for Alec Pierce, who's running more of the deep field stuff, running the dig routes. I don't know if Philip Rivers still has the arm to make those throws, so we'll have to wait and see. But still, like, if Philip Rivers were to start this week, and again, I haven't put the data in, but just like basically knowing how these things work, I don't even think he would project for 200 passing yards. I'll probably have him like around 190, and my guess is the market will have him under 200.
Jonathan Taylor, roughly 35-40 rushing attempt projection, I'm sure, in these starts. But you mentioned it. I mean, look, Steichen's obviously very familiar with Rivers. He was on the Chargers offensive staff from 2014 through 2020, so certainly plenty of time there with old man Phil. It's just, man, the thing I go back to, Dwayne, I think Rivers' mind is obviously still fine, and I'm sure he knows where to go with the football and the scheme. Even heard from J.J. Watt that Rivers has been running this same sort of scheme for the high school offense he's been in charge of over the last few years. I just wonder what happens when he takes a hit, man, because honestly, I heard Gronk being asked about Tom Brady still playing. And Gronk was saying, like, yeah, his mind, even his arm's still there. It's just a matter of still being able to take those hits. So that's where I'm worried. And I'm worried about it this Sunday against Seattle. And God, Dwayne, they play the Texans in week 18, man. Like, good God, I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, right off the bat, when you play the Seattle Seahawks, it's a minus 0.5 yards per attempt deduction, like the way I have our model set up. Like you look for the outlier defenses, YPA. Obviously, the Seahawks are up there, and I look at the season as well as what they've done over the last 4 games. So whoever is starting for the Colts will be getting that deduction. It doesn't really matter what name. That is one of the more interesting narratives, though, is that Phillip Rivers has been getting in the mental reps because this is the scheme he runs for his high school that he coaches. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but hey, at least he has been thinking about football.
Either way, what an entertaining development. Okay. I'm not saying it's going to be good for Colts fans, but just out of everything that could have kind of happened the rest of this season, I will say this was probably the most entertaining outcome. So thank you, NFL script writers. Speaking of that Texans defense, they really might be able to sink their teeth into this Cardinals offense this week, guys, because unfortunately left tackle Paris Johnson, is considered week to week now with a sprained MCL. Only other meaningful injury up there I wanted to pass along was that DK Metcalf should be okay for Monday night. Had the stomach pain that actually sent him to the hospital after their Sunday game. Mike Tomlin did say he is, quote, moving in the right direction. He doesn't think the stomach will, quote, jeopardize his week 15 availability. So with that, everyone, let's get into the utilization report. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a quick word to our friends at DraftKings. Big games, big moments, and even bigger upside this week. I have teamed up with DraftKings Pick Six to give you a new way to get in on the action. With Pick Six, you ride the upside by making simple predictions. Will a player score more or less than the number listed? You put your picks together, and the more you hit, the bigger your payout. And right now, there's an incredible offer, guys. New DraftKings Pick Six customers play $5 or more on your first pick set and get $50 back in bonus picks. That's right. New customers play $5 on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus picks instantly. So don't miss your shot to ride that upside. Download DraftKings Pick Six. Get out in all the action. Sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. Thanks to DraftKings Pick Six for sponsoring this. Let's make this season one to remember. It's the utilization report presented by DraftKings. Dwayne has been pouring his blood, sweat, and tears into all the usage nuggets that you guys need to know to get ready for week 15 and beyond. So I want to start off with one of the superstars and MVP candidates of the 2025 season, Jahmyr Gibbs, absolutely getting force-fed the football ever since Dan Campbell took over play calling. So yeah, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, Dan Campbell took over in week 10, and obviously with the Lions in a little bit of trouble, Ian, he's leaned into the best player on his offense. Like, I mean, look, Amon-Ra St. Brown's there too, so he's also amazing. But Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, both really good players. But Campbell, the snaps have gone from 62% to 67%. And you're like, oh, okay, 5% bump. But look at the attempts, 52% up to 62%, so a 10% bump. And the really big thing, routes going from 52 to 62, and what that's done, Ian, with Sam Laporta out, not getting those underneath targets, the target share has gone from 14% to 23%, from 3.9 targets per game to 7. And you know what a cheat code that is, especially for a player like Jahmyr Gibbs. So now really he's sitting on the same plane as far as dual threat backs as what we get from Christian McCaffrey and what we get from Devon Achane. And you know, when we look at Gibbs, more explosive player than what we have with CMC. And this is a better offense than either one of those guys. So this is your running back one the rest of the way. It's Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think that Dan Campbell's going to keep the pedal to the metal here because the Lions can't let up, man. They got to keep pressing if they want to make the playoffs.
Feeling pretty good if you got Jahmyr Gibbs ahead of the fantasy playoffs. Hopefully even bigger things are ahead. That said, Dwayne, RJ Harvey is someone who, no, isn't exactly being ranked up there with the CMCs and Jahmyr Gibbs of the world, but certainly still making his presence felt. 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. Had a season-high 67% snap rate in week 14. Maybe wasn't the most efficient start to his career, but honestly, I was impressed with how good he did look eye test-wise against the Raiders. Maybe even bigger and better things to come down the stretch.
Yeah, he's been the running back 9 in 3 games as the starter. Now, that has come due to touchdowns, Ian, to your point. It's not like he's just been gobbling up massive chunks of yards. So that is a little bit of a red flag, but averaging 17.1 fantasy points. He's got a 79 utilization score, though. And if we look back historically at guys that have been in that range, 15% of them have been top 6 running backs. 27% of them have been running back 7 to 12. So you've got a chance at a running back 1. Most likely what you're looking at is a strong running back 2. 37% of his comparisons came in between running back 13 and 18. So that's where I put him in the rest of season projections, right there as a borderline running back 1. I did look at the schedule. You're going to have to play the Packers. That's a minus 2.4 fantasy boost versus running backs. Then you get the Jaguars. That's a minus 3.1. And then you get the Chiefs at a minus 2.6. I will say the one nice little silver lining this last week, you talked about the snap share reaching a season high. It was also that route participation rate. And then we got the 16% target share. So if you can be on the field a little bit more in passing downs, that's a great way to offset some of the matchups that you may get where you can't get a lot done on the ground. So we'll see if that sticks for Harvey. But I think, yeah, borderline running back 1. If he didn't have these matchups, like I would have put him into the top 12. But the matchups kept him right there on the borderline. So high end running back 2.
Has had these 3 starts, has 12 receptions in those games. That's actually tied for the second highest mark on the Broncos. Only wide receiver 1, Cortland Sutton, with more. So very involved in that passing attack, which is good to see, as much as I'm sure everyone enjoyed watching Tyler Bidet get all those fantasy-friendly targets to start the season. So, Dwain, and again, the early ranks, which are live on fantasylife.com. I have Harvey as my RB14. Wet Blanket Friedman's a little bit lower as RB17. So I have Harvey ahead of guys like Kyron Williams, Quinshon Judkins, Breece Hall, and Ashton Genty. I do have him behind Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, and Chase Brown. So would you, Dwain, be willing to back actually, RJ Harvey ahead of any of those guys, Williams, Etienne, or Chase Brown?
I think you have him about at the right spot. I mean, I might come in like one spot higher. I think the question is Etienne, right? We've got the one data point with Etienne last week with the fumbles from Tootin. And if it's more than a 1 week scenario where they let Etienne keep the lead role, then he should clearly be ranked ahead of what we have with RJ Harvey. We don't know that that's going to happen. So right now I'm really projecting the backfield for the Jaguars really the way it's been for most of the season, which is still good for Etienne, but Harvey has a slightly better role than that. So that's the only one I would debate between those two. But also, again, can't really argue it. And I know how things go in a 1 week sample. So I really don't argue with people about things like that anymore. I've learned better, Ian.
Yeah, for sure. It's who had that one quote saying like, I'm just done arguing with people if they want to say, oh, it was Keanu Reeves. He was like, if someone say 5 + 6 is 17, I just say, okay, man, have a good rest of your day. So certainly,
exactly.
Decent advice to have in the fantasy streets as well. So RJ Harvey, again, whether you want to rank him RB13, RB15, imagine he will be in far, far, far more lineups than not here throughout the playoff stretch, as he should be. Guys, plenty more utilization goodness to get to. I did want to, again, remind you that new DraftKings Pick Six customers, if you play $5 or more on your first pick set, you will get $50 back in bonus picks. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app, get in on all the action, and sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. Some of the greatest wide receivers of all time, Jerry Rice, Larry Fitzgerald, Randy Moss, and Dwain, Michael Wilson without Marvin Harrison Jr. This guy cannot stop scoring fantasy points. We do not know when the artist formerly known as Maserati Marv will be returning from that heel injury, but man, as long as he does remain sidelined, I have found it is in fact impossible to get Michael Wilson out of the top 12 in the ranks. I have him as wide receiver 12. Yes, he's playing the Houston Texans defense. Also, yes, Dwain, I don't care. He's getting 16 targets per game. This is ridiculous, man.
Yeah, I mean, 16 targets per game. Let's say like they put clamps on him and manage to take away 4 of those targets, and he still gets 12. No. And let's say that the defender defends 50% of those. That's still 6 catches, man. 6 catches is a lot in fantasy football, So I'm with you. I mean, he's averaged 30.8 fantasy points per game. You mentioned the 16 targets per game. He's got a 34% target share over the 3 games without Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got 190 air yards per game. His utilization score over those 3 games is a 97. Guys, it is so hard to have a utilization score of 97 in 1 game, much less over a 3-game sample. Having said that, it is a 3-game sample, so we know we're still dealing with something small here, but I just think that he's shown such like the flash has been so intense, and just the way the Cardinals run their offense, Ian, I basically feel like whichever guy is there, they just let him run the stuff that they want to be the first read for Jacoby Brissett. And Jacoby Brissett is just basically saying, hey, man, I'm just fitting the ball in there. Like, and to the receiver's credit, like Michael Wilson's done a nice job getting open. So, again, small sample. We've seen a lot of wide receivers flash over a 3-game sample this year. Romeo Doubs at one point, we thought might be a wide receiver 2. Jordan Addison, we thought might be a wide receiver 2 at one point. Michael Pittman at one point averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game. We talked about him as a potential wide receiver 2. So these things sort of happen. But notice, none of those numbers, those were all in the 20s and 18s. None of those numbers were 30.8 per game, Ian. So I think he profiles as a wide receiver 1 in any games without Marvin Harrison Jr. Everybody's looking at the screen going, duh, Dwain, thanks for sharing. I think if we have a game where once we get Marvin Harrison Jr. back, he has to go to wide receiver 3 territory until he proves otherwise. I do have to say this though, Ian, like I know that last game we got, it was Marv getting the work, but it wouldn't surprise me, as well as Michael Wilson's played, that Marv comes back and we don't see that again. And it actually is still Michael Wilson as the player leading the team, and them splitting it up a little bit. So we'll see what happens with it. But wide receiver 3 if we have Harrison, wide receiver 1 if not. And I'll probably be in the same range as you, borderline wide receiver 1 this week with the matchup.
That's where Freeman and Walls are also at right now in our Fantasy Life alleged expert ranks. So I do think it becomes a lot more interesting if Marv does return to the lineup. I'm with you. Like, I'm not going to move Michael Wilson too far down the ranks. And honestly, just given the fact it is a heel injury for Marv, Dwain, I think that would also compel me to go ahead and give Michael Wilson the nod in a head-to-head decision. They're going to be close, but it's not like before when Marv was returning from a concussion, a situation where it's like, all right, like he's good to go. This isn't going to be a reduced snap count or any more risk of injury than you might have during the course of a normal week. So looking at it now, man, just again, we got Christian Watson as wide receiver 26, followed by Cortland Sutton, Brian Thomas Jr., Deebo Samuel, Chris Godwin, our consensus wide receiver 29 and 30. I think that's probably about where I would put Michael Wilson ahead of them. I think it's very close between him, Watson, Abuka, Sutton. Is that about the range you're thinking too?
Yeah, I think it's about the range. Obviously, anytime you play the Texans and if the ball gets distributed across 3 guys, like it can make it tough. I just did the projections on the Cardinals earlier, and I have a passing over on Jacoby Brissett. Surprise. I'm higher than the market is. Obviously, like I'm deducting yards per attempt for playing the Texans. I have them ranked as one of the top 3 defenses in the league against the pass. But look, man, Jacoby every single week comes out here and does this. So do we think he's going to throw for 310 yards this game? No, but I think he can still throw for 250, Ian. And if he throws 2 touchdowns, we have a good chance one of those goes to Michael Wilson.
Again, guys, whether they're garbage points or scored in the first quarter, they all count the same in fantasy land. So 3 games this year, again, without Marvin Harrison, where we have seen him have 15 plus targets. The only other wide receiver that's done that, Jahmyr freaking Chase. So pretty good company there for Michael Wilson. We'll see if he can stay hot. Someone else absolutely dominating targets as of late. Browns tight end 1 at this point, Harold Fannin in 3 games with Shedeur Sanders. He has a team high 22 targets. Jerry Jeudy at 12. The only other Browns pass catcher even in double digits. So Dwain, again, we've seen the talent all season long. We saw before the season even started and everything he was doing at Bowling Green and throughout the offseason process. But man, it does seem like right now, as fantasy gets into the playoffs, Harold Fannin might be what the kids like to call a league winner.
Yeah, man. Harold Fannin, step 1, like we liked him in the supermodel, the rookie supermodel. Like he showed that he was a very talented prospect. Step 2, he actually does get nice draft capital because we didn't know he was a guy that we thought a lot of teams might view as a tweener, might fall around 4 or 5. So it was nice to see Harold Fannin get some draft capital. Then we see right out of the gate, man, in week 1, like they didn't have him in a full-time role, but they obviously had plans for him, moving him all over the formation. They had him at H-back, put him at fullback, put him at tight end, put him in the slot. The problem was he was stuck in that 60 to 70% route participation range. And when you have a guy like David Njoku, a good veteran tight end, that can often be the case. But the thing I like about this, Ian, is that it's not just due to the injury to Njoku. Hey, Njoku, hope that you get better, hope that you're good enough to suit up. But really, even before the injury to Njoku last week, Harold Fannin was in the role we had seen the 2 weeks before. He had an 83% route participation rate over those first 3 drives with Njoku. So he's now sitting at 87% route participation over the last 3 games. You know the magic number historically is 80%. If you're in that range, typically, like you have a really good shot at being a top 12 tight end. But now we see what Harold Fannin's been doing, targets per route run, one of the league leaders at tight end, and the upside that we get with Jahmyr Sanders, I think, is the other key in. Not that we're saying Jahmyr Sanders is going to come out and throw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns every week, but let's be honest, that's not a ceiling that we ever saw with Dillon Gabriel. So at least we know it's on the table that Jahmyr can come out and throw for 250, and it wouldn't be a stretch. So Dillon Gabriel averaged 170 passing yards per game, 1.2 touchdowns. Now, he played 5 full games. Sanders has only played 3, averaging 240. But the big underlying thing I like to look at, Ian, is the yards per attempt, 8.3. That's a 1.7 advantage for Jahmyr over Dillon Gabriel. And I think when we lay our eyes on the game, we also see the same thing. We see a guy in Jahmyr Sanders that's not just trying to get the ball out all the time in the quick passing game. He's willing to push the ball vertically down the field. That's very good for a player like Harold Fannin, not because he's the guy working downfield, but it's because the defense has to respect that. And then he gets that catch underneath and he actually gets the yak. Before with Dillon Gabriel, everybody's just sitting on all those routes and there's just not as in, Fannin was doing fine even with Dillon Gabriel, but now with Jahmyr Sanders, I just think that there's more upside here. So if you look at the big time throw rates, any data point you want to look at, Jahmyr Sanders is miles ahead of where Dillon Gabriel was. So I think that, yes, you have a top 6 tight end. And if you guys are watching this live and you still have your free agency waiver wire, 60% of the time right now, he's available on Yahoo. So he is a top 6 tight end. It will not surprise me, Ian, if he finishes as the tight end 4 the rest of the way. He came in as the tight end 5 in the rest of season projections when I updated them earlier today in PPR formats. So this is a must add. And if you have a roster spot that's easy, to like let go of someone and you already have Trey McBride or George Kittle, don't let your league mate that's having to play some crappy tight end get Harold Fannin Jr. Like that's how much I think about Harold Fannin Jr. right now. I would be willing to pick him up just to block the other manager from potentially offsetting my George Kittle or my Trey McBride or Brock Bowers in the fantasy playoffs.
And it's literally only been McBride and Bowers outscoring Fannin since Shador's been under center. So, Dwayne, there's going to be a lot of situations where I think Fannin could be your preferred flex option, even if, again, you are lucky enough to have one of those tight ends. Like just doing my flex rankings yesterday, I would start Harold Fannin over Deebo Samuel, over Kayshon Boutte, over Chuba Hubbard and Kenneth Gainwell. Like those are guys who, again, I think, I don't know about you, Dwayne, but personally, like I don't even always go to the second tight end, maybe as much as I should think about doing so in my rosters. But when someone like Fannin, bro, like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, especially if you guys play in these deeper leagues, like you and I play in the flex league from Jake Seeley. I had to do that multiple times this year. You're in some of these leagues where starting that second tight end really can make sense. The utilization score comparisons based over the last 3 weeks, Ian, top 3 tight end performers, 42% of the time. 50% of them finished tight end 4 to 6. So that's 92% of the time, guys. These guys that have been like Harold Fannin Jr. have been top 6 tight ends. Like it's happening. The only thing that could happen that would derail it is if the Browns offense just completely, craps itself, which is like, it's totally a possibility, but I think you just have to bet the Browns offense is a little bit better with Jahmyr Sanders and just lean into it.
I think we're starting McBride, Kittle, Bowers over Fannin, feeling good about that. They are the big 3 for a reason. Kelsey's close. No Drake London, Pitts. I think you could talk about doing it. And Ferguson if CD's out. Those are the only guys I could consider doing.
Yeah, I would say Ferguson if CD's out over Fannin. I would start Fannin over everyone else you named. Besides the top 3, obviously.
Consensus. Right, yeah. Consensus top 5 fantasy life tight end. We'll see how, again, some of those other injuries shake out. Speaking of Mr. Kyle Pitts, though, Dwayne, not to put him down because he has been a pretty awesome fantasy asset in his own right with Drake London sideline. So, again, we are recording this Tuesday afternoon. We'll see what happens to London, but just given the fact he was listed to start the week as a DMP and we're still kind of getting that day-to-day message from the Falcons, I'm starting to wonder if they are, in fact, going to hold him out until week 16. So, again, unfortunate for Drake London fantasy managers, but Kyle Pitts has been the major beneficiary here, Dwayne. In Kirk Cousins' 4 starts, which conveniently have not had Drake London in them, Pitts has 32 targets, and in second place is Darnell Mooney at 16, okay? So literally half of the opportunities that Pitts has gotten. And now they're facing a Buccaneers defense that don't look now. Kirk Cousins actually had a lot of success against last year.
Yeah, twice. It might be the only team I think that he really had any success against last year. He did cook the Buccaneers, but you mentioned it. It's really in these games without Drake London. And remember, we're at the time of year, guys, and I know you don't want to hear this if you got Drake London on your roster, but we see teams just start to shut players down. And the Falcons, while they are in a division where they're not, I don't think they're technically 100% eliminated yet. Ian, anything can happen in that division. Like if they don't get a win this week and Drake London doesn't play, I just don't see the reason to play him. Now I get it. Bill Parcells says football players play football during football season, but we see this a lot, man. It happens with a lot of different positions where they'll just start shutting these guys down. And to your point, man, with Kirk Cousins over these last 3 games, a 28% target share for Kyle Pitts. So the former number 4 overall pick, from 5 years ago now in the NFL draft. He's got a utilization score of 81 over that span, and he's averaging 11.6 fantasy points per game. So I think he's in that low end to mid range tight end 1 territory. He's a lock in the top 12 right now. I mean, he's giving you over 15 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 games. And man, Darnell Mooney, not really looking that good. He and Kirk Cousins don't seem to really have that old mojo. They were trying to make, David Sills a thing, and then they threw him a screen pass last week, and it bounced straight off of his pads into the air, and it was a pick. Casey Washington's the guy they liked earlier in the season. They're not even playing him anymore. So there's just really no one else here for the Falcons, man. Like if you took your microphone and did man on the street and went out and started asking people to name Falcons players not named Drake London or Kyle Pitts, people will run out of names really quickly after Bijan Robinson.
Kyle Pitts just doing his best Brad Pitt impression from Troy. Is there no one else? Screaming at a bunch of just nameless Falcons wide receivers that we barely even heard of. So honestly, though, Dwayne, you might be understating where he actually is going to be in the ranks right now. With Drake London out, Friedman actually has him as his tight end 4. Waz has him as his tight end 5. Right now, I have Drake London in the ranks, so I'm a little bit lower. But again, McBride, Kittle, Bowers, I'll give Fannin the benefit of the doubt. I could see going as high as tight end 5. I'll put Ferguson ahead of Kyle Pitts if CeeDee Lamb's out of the picture. Kelsey versus Pitts is close. I don't think any lower than tight end 7, man. I would take Pitts over Tyler Warren, over Brenton Strange, Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, and those guys.
Yeah, look, Pitts is the number 7 tight end over these 3 games with Kirk Cousins. So, I can't really – and utilization score and in fantasy points per game. His historical comps, now we're just isolating down to these 3 games, so it's a small sample. But there's a reason we're doing it, which is Drake London is out of the offense, right? So, when you were top 6 tight ends, maybe I'm just gun shy to call Kyle Pitts, a top 6 tight end the rest of the way, just because I feel like anytime we've ever done that, we've completely jinxed it. But yeah, I mean, all the data, it points to that. I'll probably have him as tight end 6 or 6.
And here's what you get when you watch sports with Xfinity. There's a Sports Zone which features with Xfinity. There's a Sports Zone which features every pro football game and over 1,000 college games, highlights and alerts all in one place. How about them apples? And oh yeah, by the way, you can beat up to 4 stadiums at once with the multi-view feature. Low key, I would say one of the top inventions that we have had in the 21st century. There's also the Xfinity Fan View, live scores, odds and stats, all in one place, personalized to you. And note I mentioned you can catch all this in Xfinity Enhanced 4K, a simply stunning visual experience. All you have to do, guys, is use that voice remote and just say football. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity, imagine that. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Note that restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees are extra and subject to change.
5, but he has a utilization score of 78. His historical comps have averaged 15. 35% of them have been top 12 running backs. The other 60% have been running back 13 to 24. A small percentage there, guys, 5% coming in as running back 3s, but the majority of them have been of the high end running back 2 territory. So we've still got top 12 upside here for Javonte. I already worked on the Dallas projections before the show. He was inside my top 12 in the projections for this week, probably be borderline running back 1 in my rankings. Not sure where you have him at this week, Ian, against the Vikings, who've really been a tougher matchup for pass catchers than the run game. But yeah, I think Javonte right there still is a borderline running back 1 the rest of the way, and definitely due to score some more fantasy points.
I got him RB13 because even as we saw over these last 2 weeks in tough matchups against Lions and Chiefs defenses that have been stingy against opposing running backs, what happened? He got a lot of usage. He managed to fall into the end zone from a few yards out and save the day in fantasy land. So better matchups a few weeks before, was unlucky in the touchdown department, but he was efficient enough to go ahead and still make it work. This actually shocked me, Dwayne. Javonte Williams this year in terms of PPR scoring has not had a single week where he finished worse than the RB26, man. That's a hell of a floor.
Yeah, he's got a really good floor, and the ceiling is just a lot higher than what people remember. Like, this is definitely a player that can score 2 rushing touchdowns in one game and give you 100 yards plus catch a couple of balls out of the backfield. Like, he's not getting a ton of targets because you've got CeeDee Lamb, you've got George Pickens, you've got Ferguson, you've got Flournoy kind of stepping up and doing his thing as well. But he's still getting the routes, man. He's out there. So anytime you're out there, if a defense can take away some of those other weapons, then you're the guy that gets the check down passes. So Javonte always carries some sneaky upside in the pass game too. Doesn't happen every week, but he's a guy that can pop up with a 13-14% target share and you're not surprised.
Again, potentially bigger and better things to come from both Javonte Williams and Terry McLaurin. And for the rest of the Fantasy Live show, we got more under and over performers coming up, guys. First, a quick word to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. Critics are calling it the best deal ever because, guys, guess what? If you're a fantasy football commissioner, you have the chance to make 25,000 doll hairs, actually 25 American dollars, 25,000 variety, guys. Mike's Hard Lemonade, the brand for the people who go hard, is launching the first ever fantasy commissioner endorsement deal. You can actually nominate your commissioner for an MVP level endorsement package, including, yes, $25,000 in a signing bonus and also a bunch of other cool swag, clout, and aura. So just seems like a great situation to, again, thank that commissioner. I know, at least I'm personally not in the habit of tipping my commissioner after going through, again, a long, cold fantasy season. So again, what could you do instead? Go ahead and sign them up so they can maybe, just maybe, win $25,000. If you do think your commissioner deserves a spotlight, you can submit your nomination at mikesfantasyendorsementdeal.com now through December 9th. So hopefully you guys, again, hear this before it is going to be out of the picture. Note that no purchase is necessary. The nominator must be 21 plus only. Nominee must be 25 plus only. The winner will not be hired as an endorser. Again, you can see those rules at mikesfantasyendorsementdeal.com. Please drink responsibly. This is Mike's Hard Lemonade Company in Chicago, Illinois. We got some utilization report movers to go through, Dwain, starting off with a Chiefs running back who, yes, started the season as the backup, but he's gotten that starting job and not turned back. Talk about Kareem Hunt, someone who has been the RB20 in PPR points per game since originally taking over for Isaiah Pacheco back in week 8.
Yeah, the big note here on Kareem Hunt is that we've had Isaiah Pacheco back in the lineup for the last 2 games, and he's really retained the starting role. Over those 2 games, he's got 63% of the snaps, 62% of the rushing attempts, and he also leads the team with a 59% route participation for running backs. So only 9 fantasy points per game over those 2 games, but that's still a pretty good utilization score, and his historical comps have averaged 12.1. So not a guy we're screaming, guys, oh my God, you have to be starting Kareem Hunt, but like he's still a usable fantasy player. Like he's a strong running back 3 in my opinion. And until we see a scenario where Isaiah Pacheco takes over more, I think we just have to assume this is the way that the Chiefs are going to run the backfield for the rest of the season. And to give Hunt credit, like he's just been a really good short yardage back, Ian. And like he's a decent shot to score a touchdown every week. When I work on the projections and I look at, I always like to sort by all the different things that I've got projected for the week, just kind of as a like quick litmus test. And every week, like over the last month, it's like Kareem Hunt sitting up there projected for over half a touchdown. Like, and the list of players that get projected that way, guys, is pretty short. But then when I look at Hunt's stuff, I look at his short yardage carries, I look at his work inside the 5-yard line, look at the offense that he's on. I don't ever end up changing it. I'm like, yep, he is one of the better bets to score a touchdown each week.
It is wild just how money he has been in those short yardage situation, guys. 3rd and 4th and 1s this year. He's 25 for 30 at picking up the first down, 83% conversion rate. That really is already one of the best marks in the league. It's 5th actually among running backs with at least 6+ carries. But even the guys ahead of him, Jalen Warren and a few other dudes, like they only have 9 or 10 such carries, not 30 like Kareem Hunt out here. So again, success rate really has been high. No, he's not ripping off, 40+ yard runs each and every week. But you know what? There's not really that many running backs that are doing that anyway. So put some respect on Kareem Hunt's name. But I don't need to tell you that, Dwain. Maybe I just need to tell Wallace and Friedman that he's coming as my RB28. They have him down there inside the kind of mid-tier 30s at this point. So I would start Kareem Hunt over Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Gainwell, Ramondre Stevenson, like anyone that's really stuck in kind of that 2-back committee that's almost on the 1B side of things. I think Kareem Hunt definitely warrants starting ahead of those guys.
Well, I think, you feel better about him having a better snap share than all of those guys. I will say, like, if you're in a situation where you're an underdog and like you're wanting to bet on a player suddenly having a bigger role that maybe has looked a little better than Kareem Hunt, like in that example you gave is Chuba Hubbard. If you think the last data point that we saw on the Panthers backfield is really the beginning of Chuba Hubbard taking over that situation, and you need the upside of a player that might be able to score 20 fantasy points, like, I'm fine if you want to go with Hubbard. But I think you've got the right range there of players, because he is, like we said, he's still got a 62% snap share over these last 2 games with Isaiah Pacheco back. None of those guys that you just named have that.
Another running back who unfortunately maybe isn't getting quite as many snaps these days, though, Kyren Williams trending down. Blake Corum obviously taking a big chunk of that. And lo and behold, every time they get inside the 5-yard line, Matthew Stafford has to make sure he targets Davante Adams at least once or twice first. So not like it's the end of the world here. Kyren Williams is still an RB1 on the season in PPR points per game. He scored 6 touchdowns in 6 games since the bye. So again, 15 touches per game still can go a very long way in this high-flying Rams offense. But that said, Dwayne, the familiar top 5 heights that we've seen from Kyren over the past few years simply haven't been there as of late.
Yeah, they're gone. Look, he plays in the number 1 offense in the NFL, so that's going to keep him as a running back too. But if he played on a team that we didn't like as much, like, this would be a much worse situation. Fortunately, he plays for the Rams. But the big takeaway is over the first 6 weeks of the season, Ian, he had 70% of the rushing attempts for the Rams. If you look at him over the last 7 games, that's fallen to 55%. Blake Corum is a real thing. That's the big takeaway here. It's not like Corum has passed him, but Corum's playing well enough that it's not just the issue of them throwing the touchdowns to Davante Adams. They're now giving enough of a workload to Blake Corum, and they're doing it consistently on a week in and week out basis, Ian, that we have to project it this way. Like, so I looked at Kyren last week, and I was looking at it, and I was like, man, like, I feel like I have his rushing yards projected low, and I started looking at all this stuff again. I was like, no, I mean, this is just where he's at. Obviously, Corum went off to have a really big game last week, guys. Kyren was still the lead back, but it's just a situation where if you look at those snaps and you look at the rushing attempts, they are clearly different than what we saw for the early part of the year. Could you imagine if we had the old Kyren Williams role from 2 years ago in this version of the Rams offense? Guys, you would have a top 5 fantasy back. You have a top 3 guy. Okay. So not the case, but still a guy, like Ian said, everybody's starting him, but it's not like he's winning you your weeks. He's just not losing them either.
Well, he's also gotten back to being the year 1, year 2 efficient Kyren Williams, 4.9 yards per carry this year. That's the 9th best mark among a lot of running backs, guys. I mean, let me see, freaking 57 running backs with at least 50 carries. But guess what? Blake Corum's in 4th at 5.4 yards per carry. So both Corum and Kyren providing top 10 efficiency. Again, Rams offense looking like an absolute wagon here moving into the playoffs. We'll see if they can keep it up. Someone who has been keeping it up, Dwayne, Jaguars, wide receiver 1, I guess we can say at this point. Jacoby Myers, ever since he did get that full-time starting role in his second game with the Jags, he has worked as a legit wide receiver 1 in fantasy land with 15.6 PPR points per game. So, Dwayne, I did go ahead and check just every Jaguars wide receiver that has played with Trevor Lawrence over the years. The top 2 in passer rating when targeted, Tim Patrick and Jacoby Myers. It's the most T-Law thing ever for these to be the guys, so I guess have the best chemistry with them. But hey, it's working so far. T-Law is playing great, and certainly Jacoby's benefiting from it too.
Yeah, Tim Patrick also looking good as well. To your point on Jacoby Myers, in these last 4 games where he's really been in that, he's been with the Jaguars for 5 games, but he's been in a full-time starting role for the last 4 games. He has moved his utilization season score up 15 points. It's really hard to do that at this point in the year, guys, because once you get 12 games in and where your utilization score is, especially for a player who's already played a lot of snaps like Jacoby Myers, like moving your score by 15 points is like near impossible. But he's up to a utilization score of a 74. And if you look at it, the route participation rate, Ian, 90%, target share, 27%. And the thing he's getting here, 38% of the end zone targets over the last 4 games with the Jaguars have gone to Jacoby Myers. So getting more love once they get down into that green zone, get inside the 10-yard line, something that we haven't always seen for him. So averaging 15.6 fantasy points per game. His utilization score says he's a borderline wide receiver 2, and he's actually slightly outperforming his historical comps have averaged 14.5 fantasy points. So he's actually potentially due for a little bit of negative regression. But if you look at like the spread of where all of his comparisons come in, you either have a low-end wide receiver 2 or you have a very good high-end wide receiver 3, most likely the rest of the way.
coming in as our consensus wide receiver 20 in the ranks. So again, Team Fantasy Life on that low end wide receiver 2 track for now. Cannot say the same though for Packers wide receiver Romeo Doubs. Dwayne, since that 3 touchdown explosion against the Cowboys, 1 single trip to the end zone in the last 9 games. Now with Christian Watson doing his thing and Jaden Reed back in the picture, sure, it seems like Romeo Doubs has kind of reinserted himself as the wide receiver 3 in this offense.
Yeah, so week 3 to 9, Doubs was the wide receiver 1 for the Packers with an 89% route participation rate, a 24% target share. And of those first 3 weeks, he was kind of dealing with an injury he was coming back from. So things were looking really good. But the dynamics of the receiving room have changed a lot since then, Ian. We got Christian Watson back, who's really operating as the wide receiver 1 from a playing time. Last week, we got Jaden Reed back. Dontavian Wicks also was dealing with some injuries earlier in the year. And then Matthew Golden over the last few games has been out, and he actually got back on the field for a little bit of playing time last week. And so those other guys are creating a rotation for Romeo Doubs. If we look at it over the last, several weeks, like he hasn't hit an 80% route participation in 4 of his last 5 games. Now, one of those games he was hurt. So really 1 out of the last 4 that he's been healthy, that he's gotten to an 80% route participation rate. So when you're on a team like the Packers that also likes to be balanced, Ian, likes to run the ball quite a bit, that's not a very good recipe for success. So if you look at his comps, 47% of them finished as low-end wide receiver 4s or high-end wide receiver 5. So Doubs is now a borderline wide receiver 4 in the rest of season projections.
And for this week, he is ranked outside of our top 50 options. So any close to our sit decision with Doubs might not be a bad idea to take the other guy. That said, as we move on to tight ends here, Colston Loveland, Dwayne, someone who has seen his usage start to trend up, even with Cole Kmet back in the picture. Haven't seen huge booms coming here. That Bengals game still is the only time he's caught at least 5 passes or gained more than 55 yards in a game. But he certainly is looking good with his opportunities, and maybe, just maybe, best is still to come.
I mean, you really hit the high notes there. Like the playing time is still not quite where we want it. It's better than it was early in the year. Like he's got a 63% route participation rate over the last 4 games, still sharing time with Cole Kmet though. The big thing though to take away is over the last 4 weeks, he's got a 21% targets per route run. He's second on the team behind Luther Burden. Shout out to another rookie on the Bears. Both of them stuck in these part-time roles. But the big takeaway for me on Loveland when I handled the rest of season projections, Ian, I went ahead and projected it for a little bit higher route participation rate than what he's had, just because we do see these young players sometimes come on, and it's like you just want to try to be ahead of it a little bit. So if someone did cut Colston Loveland, in your fantasy league and you're hurting at the tight end position, you can't get someone like Harold Fannin, or maybe you have a guy you're fine starting, but you're not crazy about it and you want some upside to stash, I still think that Loveland is one of the better names. He came in as the tight end 13 in my rest of season projections earlier today.
I started him off this week as tight end 18, but Waz and Friedman have him as tight end 14, tight end 12, respectively. So I'm going to have to get in the lab and see if he does deserve to be moving up. It is a bit of a tier in that spot in my defense. Last one, Dwayne, someone who unfortunately has been trending down a little bit. Colts tight end Tyler Warren. Weeks 1 through 7, man, was absolutely balling out. 14.5 PPR points per game. That was the 3rd highest mark at the position. That said, since week 8, just 9.9 PPR points per game. Tight end 15 status here. So I don't think anyone doubts the ability at hand, but it is a crowded offense. And once we've kind of removed that high-end quarterback play from the picture, it's impacted everyone involved.
Yeah, that's the key, right? If you look at the Colts, and once we really recalibrated the kind of offense they were going to be this year, us, along with the markets, we're projecting them as one of the better teams pretty much every single week. They're one of the league leaders in touchdowns per drive, one of the league leaders in reaching the red zone. Those things are all in massive jeopardy now. Whether we have Phillip Rivers under center, whether it's Riley Leonard, whether it's Brett Rippon, doesn't really matter. Those situations, those are all going to be downgrades from what we saw with Daniel Jones at this point, until we're proven otherwise, right? Maybe one of those guys can surprise us, Ian, but that's the big issue. When I did his rest of season projections today, like with Daniel Jones, you're talking about 25 passing touchdowns on the season was where I had him projected. Like I can't project any of these guys for like 18 in a full season. Okay, so that's a massive hit to Tyler Warren as well as the rest of these receivers. Warren's still getting his targets, got a 21% target share over the last 4 games. Still think he's a very good player, but the offense just takes a massive hit. Unfortunately, man, I really feel for Colts fans. I was listening to you and Kendall do the opening lines on yesterday's waiver wire show, and I was with you guys. You're like, man, we just really feel bad for Colts fans after what they've been through and the promising start, and for Daniel Jones, man, having this bounce back year and getting that Achilles injury, also in a contract year year, to Kendall's point. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, not very optimistic about the quarterback situation right now.
Maybe, just maybe, though, 44-year-old grandpa, literally, just not even trying to be mean about it. He is actually a grandpa. Philip Rivers could be here to save the day. We'll see. But Dwain, great stuff. Again, everyone check out your utilization report over at fantasylife.com. Here on the Fantasy Life Show, we'll be back tomorrow with a game-by-game preview alongside Matthew Freeman, and then back with Dwain on Thursday, going through the rankings to help get you a scholar right ahead of Week 15. So best of luck to everyone out there in the waiver wire streets. Good luck setting those lineups. Again, we'll be right back here to help you the rest of the way. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.